September 30th, 2009. The Child Welfare Information Gateway estimated that the U.S. held 423,773 children within its foster care system. Now, as a future psychologist, the foster care system greatly interests me. I was never in foster care. My parents never had foster children when I was alive. However, just living in this country and hearing a statistic like that makes me want to know more. Makes me want to know more for me, for my future profession, and how I can work with those children and know about the system, but also just to know more and how I can better help just as a citizen of this country. So, as I studied this, first I went into the history. I wanted to know where foster care started, where it came from, and how it's developed. Therefore, after the history, I moved into the current foster care system and how it works today. And finally, try to learn a little bit more about the children that are within the system. How does it affect them? How do they respond? And what can I best do to assist them in the process that they are going through? So moving to the history. However, before we can get too far in depth with the history, we must understand the definition of foster care. According to the childwelfare.gov, in the Code of Federal Regulations, foster care is defined as 24-hour services for children outside their own home. Now this adds a lot of room for freedom. Very few children are in foster care for only 24 hours. Generally they're in the system for weeks, months, some years, and some even their entire childhood. So how did they get there? Who created the foster care system, and what do the children do when they're in it? Well, first of all, the foster care system began in the early 1800s through a system that many of us are already familiar with. In the 1800s, there were thousands of children living on the streets. They had nowhere to turn, no one to help, and they were cold, hungry, and alone. The Children's Aid Society explains that in this time, Charles Loring Bruce began attempting to place children in rural homes. Thus, we have the orphan train. Now, everyone's heard of the orphan train. Yet I believe that most of us have a semi-idealistic view of it, that the children were gleeful and excited to get off the streets into these perfect farming families. However, there are many loose ends in the system, and the foster care has continued to develop much since that time. In the early 1900s, it began to really change as the Federation Adoption and Safe Families Act was passed. This allowed more protection for children. At this point, there was much abuse, but little that could be done about it. There were no laws established for what to be done if a child was found beaten by parents, especially foster care parents, with no one else there to claim them. However, even with the many changes that have occurred, Murray and Geiserich say that the system still has much room for improvement, and it is continually changing. Today, Nebraska has one of the bigger foster care systems in the state, and children remain there longer than in other states, so there's a great debate whether this is a positive aspect or a negative one. Again, it's an evolving institution, and hopefully changing for the better. In 2012, the Children's Bureau stated that these changes have been quite dramatic. While in the 1800s families were rarely screened, after the Social Security Act of 1962, children were placed in safer homes. They went to visit them, they looked into them, so the children were not placed randomly in these houses that could be very destructive for them. However, today the parents must go through much more to become an official foster care parent. Some agencies even require classes that must be taken. Adoptive Kids is one of those agencies, and they require parents to go through a program called PRIDE. PRIDE stands for Parent Resources for Information and Education, and this is just one of the many programs that some parents go through so they can be better equipped to take care of the children that will soon be entering their home. So now we know a little bit more about the history, a little bit more about the current foster care system. Let's talk about what the children experience. What is it like for children going into foster care system? After conducting research in 2011, Princeton stated that many of these children experience a variety of attachment disorders and many struggles that they go through after entering into the foster care system. And this is no surprise. Imagine a child, already young and vulnerable to life, who is taken and thrown into various homes, not knowing who to trust and who to hold on to, not knowing who they can call their parents. This is a big struggle that people, and especially psychologists or social workers going to, must understand about the child so they can better assist them, better help them be able to learn to trust. And even if it's just trusting a social service worker, being that kind face that they continue to see. So now you know. Now you know about the history of foster care. You know about the orphan train and where it began. You know about the current foster care system and the variety of classes that parents must take. And you know about the struggles that children in the system often face. So what are you going to do? The decision is yours. You may decide to delve deeper into the topic and research more about it. You may decide to do what I'm doing and go into a practice where you can work with these kids face to face, work with these families, help select positive families for the children to enter into. Or you may decide to become a foster parent yourself. Like I said, now you have the information, the decision is yours. Thank you.